How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge about 1000, and in this video we're going to talk more about the Atlantic hurricane season and determine when's our next possibility we could see Tropical Storm Bonnie in the Atlantic, and see if it could happen as early as next week. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather calls. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather content. So to begin, let's take a look at the 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook provided from the National Hurricane Center, and we still do have this disturbance, but it's very unlikely at this point that it's going to develop into Tropical Storm Bonnie, as our focus will shift into next week's tropical wave that's going to form right around the same area as this tropical disturbance, at where we could see potentially Tropical Storm Bonnie form out of it, as that's what the GFS model is currently suggesting at this point. But yeah, this disturbance, we've been talking about it over the past several days and even weeks, where this had a possibility of developing into Tropical Storm Bonnie, but it doesn't seem likely. It seems like this really struggled to really develop a very small center of circulation for this to be considered a tropical storm and to really get enough convection and lift to really enhance its wind speed around center circulation. So as a result, this really had no chance of developing, and it doesn't seem like it's going to have much of any chance in the near or even long-term future. So that's something not to worry about really anymore, as our focus will shift to, like I said, next week, where we could see our next tropical disturbance form. So let's take a look at the relative humidity in the mid-levels of the atmosphere based on what the GFS model is forecasting over the next several days. And if I were to continue to move forward, if this were to load, I'm hoping it does eventually load. Okay, now it's loading. But if we were to take a look at the relative humidity right around the 174-hour mark, we do see that GFS model wants to develop a tropical cyclone. So moving a little bit forward, you see that we're going to continue to see a plume of moisture move northwestward, and it's as a result of a gyre that's currently over Central America that I've been talking to you guys about over the past several days, as the gyre was expected to build right around Central America, which will not only bring a lot more rain and precipitation overall throughout Central America, but it could create an area where more tropical cyclones could develop either in the Eastern Pacific or the Atlantic. And we do see that possibility by as early as the 114-hour mark, where we do see that the GFS model wants to develop a low-level center right around the Wednesday timeframe, June 22nd, just off the Central American coast. And it's very similar to what the GFS model was saying with this disturbance that I was just talking to you guys about before, where Tropical Storm Bonnie was expected to develop based on what the GFS model was saying in this area, but didn't seem to pan out. And it seems like the GFS model is trying to go at it again, developing a low pressure system right around the same area it forecasted tropical storm to develop last week. So we have to wait and see if this actually pans out. So far, the GFS model, at least with this type of scenario, has already shown that it could definitely be wrong, especially when we're talking about something around 5 days out. Still a lot of uncertainty, but it's certainly something to at least be aware of, because the GFS model is still a very reliable model that you should definitely take seriously. But you see that it's under a very moist environment. There isn't really dry or stable air inhibiting it. And if I were to continue to move even forward closer to the 6 and 7 day mark, it not only becomes a tropical storm, but it becomes a quite powerful tropical storm, borderline a hurricane, just off the Yucatan Peninsula right around the 7 to 8 day mark. So of course this is very far out, but even if we were to move towards a forecast point where it's within the window of more certainty, you see that at 132-hour marks, only 5 days out, the GFS model wants to at least develop a low pressure system, which already does raise a concern that we could see Tropical Storm Bonnie out of this. Now, it's definitely different when we take a look at the European model, because unlike the GFS model, look at how much more stable air there is throughout the Caribbean at that same point, as it's just a stark contrast when it comes to moisture, because we have a GFS model wanting to bring just a high amount of humidity right around the southwestern Caribbean, while the European model wants to not only take a very stable environment, but just a very dry environment for the southwestern Caribbean, which is the reason why the European model does not want to develop a tropical cyclone. We're gonna have to wait and see. Still a lot of uncertainty, especially when we see both of the two main computer models disagreeing with each other with such a stark contrast. So we definitely need to wait and see which computer model will end up being the more correct one, because that will determine if whether or not Tropical Storm Bonnie does develop, and we need to see how much moisture there will be. And a good way to check it out is taking a look at the amount of tropical waves coming off of Africa, because eventually this should move into the southwestern portion of the Caribbean, and that will determine how much lift there is in the atmosphere, how much moisture there will be. So we definitely need to pay close attention to what comes off of the African coast, because that will determine how much moisture there will be by next week for a potential tropical storm to develop. But still a high amount of uncertainty with both of the two main computer models disagreeing with each other. But in terms of the wind shear, the GFS model and the European model aren't necessarily expecting a high amount of wind shear right around the southwestern Caribbean during next week. So if I were to continue to move forward, you see that the wind shear will stay light for the most part throughout the southwestern Caribbean, which, if in the case where there is a low pressure system, there is a high probability that it will develop, because the wind shear is just going to be very light. If I were to continue to move forward into the 123-hour mark, or around the 5-day point, we do have a decent amount of wind shear as a result of this upper level low, but that upper level low should continue to move westward, and we should see the wind shear, while it won't be completely non-existent, the wind shear will be light enough for a low pressure system to at least be able to develop into a tropical depression or tropical storm under the right conditions, which of course all really depends on how much humidity and lift there will be in the atmosphere by the next week, which is still definitely more uncertain. So really but again, the wind shear could change as well. While the wind shear does look light, we could see it maybe strengthened by next week a little bit more than originally expected. We have to wait and see with that. But really, what will determine if we will see Tropical Storm Bonnie develop in the southwestern Caribbean or not is really how much moisture there will be, and it's still uncertain at this point. But I'll make sure to keep you guys updated over the next several days regarding how much moisture we will see throughout the Caribbean. So in terms of the track, it really all depends on the position of the Bermuda Ridge and this ridge that's going to be located in the United States, because you see that's sort of going to take a northwestward trajectory where it could maybe be a threat to the United States in the very long-term future. If I were to show you guys what the GFS model is forecasting when it comes to a track forecast, you're going to see that the GFS model wants to take this a little bit further northwestward, but there is still that possibility that the GFS model wants to maybe take this south of Texas to where it doesn't impact the United States, which would definitely be the best news for the United States, not necessarily good news for Mexico, of course, but we're just going to need to wait and see how this ridge builds in the United States, because if we do see a weakness in ridging by I'd say late into 2 weeks from now, which is very late, but if we do see just enough of a weakness in ridging throughout the western Gulf of Mexico, then we could see this move northwestward rather than just straight westward once it passes the Yucatan Peninsula. So that's definitely something we're going to need to pay close attention to as well. Let's actually take a look at the 500 millibar height anomaly. to really determine the steering flows. And you see we do have this ridge over here. We do have this Bermuda ridge that's going to try to steer us northwestward. If I were to move a little bit further backwards, you're going to see that the main steering flow will primarily be this ridge that's going to be just to the north of the United States. And the GFS model at this point is projecting that the ridging will be very strong. So as a result, this will move westward towards Mexico rather than northwestward to the United States. But still highly uncertain. 180 hours out, a lot could change till then. So I'll keep you guys updated regarding the steering flow. But at this point, it seems likely that we're going to see this move northwestward into the Yucatan Peninsula. So make sure to definitely keep that in mind. But really, all in all, we just need to determine how much moisture there will be by next week to really determine if Tropical Storm Bonnie will develop. So that's something to keep in mind. And one way we could determine that is taking a look at the Saharan air layer forecast, where like last week, I did say that the Saharan dust could be an inhibiting factor for future tropical cyclones, but this dust is expected to subside by next week, so we could see still development. We could still see tropical cyclone development, because look at how the Saharan dust does subside over time, where while there is certainly Saharan dust in the Caribbean, it isn't necessarily highly concentrated as the darker browns you see. So as a result, we do see we're more likely to see a more unstable environment, a more lift in the atmosphere, because there's not really going to be a temperature inversion where the surface air will be forced to sink because the Saharan dust is so warm in the mid levels of the atmosphere. So as a result of so we need to pay attention to the Saharan dust over the next several days, but it seems likely that won't be much of an issue if we were to see low pressure system develop right around the Caribbean, which it still has yet to be seen. Now, another thing I want to point out to you guys is the MJO outlook, and the good news is that we're expecting to move into a positive MJO pattern, which does promote a little bit more of a stable environment for a 30 to 60 day period, but we still easily could see tropical cyclones develop in a positive MJO pattern. So don't think that we're not likely to receive any tropical cyclones during a positive MJO pattern, because that's certainly still a possibility. Now, taking a look at the map forecast, you see that the GFS model it wants to develop Tropical Storm Bonnie, and you see that this is expected to move northwestward into the Yucatan Peninsula. So you definitely at least need to be aware of this right around Central America. But really, this all depends on how much moisture there will be in the southwestern Caribbean to determine if we will see Tropical Storm Bonnie by next week. But yeah, guys, I guess that's it for this video. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content, and I hope you guys have a great day.